also someone who has had, I think, over 2 decades, 3 decades of experience in.
Aging me.
Well, I'm sure it feels like it's all that knowledge. It's not about age, it's just wisdom. So yeah, with Oracle and multiple OEMs around talent and around international mobility. And actually, it's great timing because we launched this week our AI micro credentials, apart from the MBA and the PhD. So perfect timing to discuss about AI agents. We actually just had like a live session on that yesterday in Barcelona. And now Dana is going to present her perspective on this, which I'm very, very thankful for. Um, yeah, let me see. Would you like to try and share your screen? Because then at some point I'm going to stop.
Sure.
There's like 6 buttons in there. There's one in the middle with share screen.
Yeah, I see. Please let me know if can you see my screen?
Yeah, looks great. Fantastic.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, Dana. So if you need me, let me know. But otherwise, I'm happy to give you the floor, and you're welcome to take it from here. Enjoy.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I am very grateful for all of you taking some time and joining me in this session. This is a very important topic, near dear to my heart for a number of reasons. But to begin, what I want to talk about is the role of AI, but more importantly, how we treat AI as within the human ecosystem. So I'll talk about leadership, systems, and ethics, and how they converge together to manage and manage human lives, but more importantly, the impact of what we do as humans in our ecosystem. And AI has a role in that. And let me dive into that very quickly. Well, there are many conflicts and environmental issues that have happened last decade. What is very close to me, I live in California, is the January 2025 California fires. I can tell you that how devastating it was, but let me share with you some of the data that I've collated through various public domains. Over 57,000 acres burned in LA, San Diego, and the surrounding counties. Some of it I saw personally. And if you can imagine the devastation in vegetation, human lives, housing, animals in the mountains, it is unimaginable to think how would our human ecosystem support the tragedies that were forthcoming. To give you a perspective, 18,000 plus structures lost. You're talking about entire neighborhoods, schools, daycares, infrastructure for supporting life. Anywhere between $52 to $57 billion worth of damage, and this is still adding up. From a California perspective, it's the costliest disaster in the last decade. Now, where I want to focus is, as humans, how we coordinate responses to situations like this. This is just an example in a number of catastrophes we've dealt with, conflicts, and they're all getting more complex. But the disaster itself was not just about the fire. It was about fractured responses that we had. This is where the human AI collaboration can change the outcome of the situation. And I'll touch a little bit on some of the potential opportunities we have to be able to mitigate some of these concerns. So, as I mentioned, global crises are increasing in frequency, in their scale, in their complexity. Um, and the traditional humanitarian responses and the models we've had in place are too slow, too fragmented, and I would venture to say too siloed. Um, AI does offer predictive powers and scalability that can allow the human systems integrated with some of the decision making processes with the capabilities that AI brings into play. So, what I'm not proposing is that the AI is the silver bullet for all things, but it just like many other things, it's a tool for us to be able to do what we do as humans better, smarter, more collaborative, and scalable. So I propose there is an equation to all of this. You know, there is a math behind everything we see and do. So why not here? So I would propose that there is AI without the human judgment creates ethical issues, scalability issues, and a lot of the things that makes humans human. Predictive models, ethical oversight can create that, develop that trust that we are so concerned with. Um, it allows for real-time data um, collectivity, and which allows for predictions. It allows for us to scale. It allows for us to manage some of these processes with more speed. With appropriate governance and transparency, we can increase the public confidence. We can um, create opportunities for um, upscaling many of the jobs that are potentially are becoming redundant. Um, our technology has changed, our ecosystem has changed. There was a time that humans did not know how to operate motor vehicles. We couldn't fly, but at some point we had to skill up to keep up with the changes in the industry, the changes in our ecosystem, the evolution of our technologies and our needs. So I would invite our leaders, the HR functions, the recruiting functions, to think about the future of work as less traditional and more of how we can color outside the lines to recognize today's environment. Um, AI is not just technology for the technology purpose. It is our ability to develop synergy, connectivity between our needs, our requirements, our ecosystem, and develop a formula to make those adjustments so that we can keep up with the times. So I've thought a lot about the strengths, human strength, the AI strength, and without any bias, we can acknowledge, and I hope that you agree, that AI strength is pattern recognition. AI strength is ability to collect mass amount of data and create these predictive models that we have already used previously, with predictive in weather patterns, predictive in earthquake patterns, and these things are not isolated. So what we need to think bigger. We need to think more in scale and real-time logistics. And all of these things are not outside the human design. Our strategic planning, our strategic thinking needs to have this built in. AI can excel pattern and stimulations and logistics in humans that humans can bring to context to. Um, the synergy between the human and AI is that context, ethics, cultural nuances, and the empathy that, as of today, AI is not capable of. Now, there are areas of study that say at some point AI could be. But I would venture to say that AI is only as good as the humans that it mimics. Now, I would like to put that for a moment down and you can think about it, but that is really, really important. Right now, AI receives directions from the humans, it receives prioritization from humans. So, for example, if we're talking about evacuating specific zones, which is what we dealt with in California fires, um, the human side must decide where um, where and how to prioritize the vulnerable groups. We feed the data to AI, and AI allows us to scale our operations um, faster, um, more areas, and able to collect our progress real time. Um, so here, considering what AI can do and the human strength, I've mentioned some of the uh, contextual judgments, ethical reasoning, some of the cultural sensitivity and emotional intelligence that humans can bring in. So if you try to balance the two out and you consider the patterns of behavior that we've seen from ourselves, from humans, I propose the question is not whether we can trust AI, it's rather whether um, we can trust ourselves, we can trust humans. And this is one of those existential questions that I think in all disciplines we think about and we sometimes pontificate. But that is a fundamental question anytime we're talking about evolution of technology, evolution of processes, policies, governance. For many of my HR colleagues, the idea is you can write a policy, but the policy is only as good as how it gets implemented. And I would say again that for leaders, for HR groups that support businesses in building infrastructures, staffing, how we develop staffing for future of work, educational systems, academia. This is not one single group approach. This is a collective thinking. It's a collective way of approaching the future of our needs, the entire ecosystem of human growth and human evolution. So I touched on governance and ethics. And this is where we create that checklist for leadership. For leadership accountability, how do we make what we do transparent? How do we make AI explainable? Many of us have family members that the moment we say AI, they say, well, is that the cloud thing? Well, they point up in the air. So specifically in academia, in tech world, we need to do a better job in explaining AI in much more layman's terms. We need to be able to build in our system bias mitigation, audit consistency and continuously. It's only through those components, those guardrails, that we can create accountability and we can keep humans in the loop and recalibrate our systems as the evolution continues. This is not, again, a silver bullet, one stop, fix it all, and we're done. It's not implementing AI and forgetting about it. It's a companion, it's a co pilot, if you will. So the recalibration, auditing our systems and processes is a continuous level of effort. And the equity, are we protecting the vulnerables? Are we protecting the entire ecosystem, not just the human side, but the entire ecosystem? And we've seen this in a lot of the conflicts. Who gets support? Who gets evacuation first? Whose house doesn't burn down? Or Are we supporting all of the wildlife in our environment? Um, and I think this adds urgency. And without governance, I would say that trust collapses. And without trust, adoption fails. Um, so I would I would like to say, in order for us as from a having our future ready for ourselves, because we as humans tend to be, what can you do for me today? What helps me today? What supports me today? And I would say we need to think about the entire humanitarian ecosystem, and we need to get ourselves ready. And this is not something for the future. The future is here. We need to do this now. And for the students of Metapilot Academy, our MBA students, this is the opportunity to have a footprint. This is an opportunity to have an impact that is scalable, and it's repetitive, and it can last for the futures to come, if you will. This is where we develop these early warning systems, dashboards for how do we forecast famine? How do we forecast weather patterns? How do we manage conflicts? And how do we know conflicts will occur? How do we manage them? How do we contain the humanitarian efforts? How do we create and support the global digital identity that I know many of the companies have, startup companies are really focused on for the displaced persons. And those displaced persons is not just the side effects of conflict and war. California fires, I'd bring that to the very immediate story. People's houses are burning down. They barely have time to evacuate their families and their pets and have enough to take with them so they can survive for an unpredicted amount of time. But what happens if all of their documentation, which we still, amazing enough, still have paper documents? What if all of it burns? Passports, immigrant documents, college degrees, COVID vaccines. But the idea is to be able to say, in the time that we're in, we need to keep up with our time. Digital identity, a global digital identity, is a necessity. And it's not far-fetched. There are companies that are doing it in UK. They already have started accepting many of these digital identities. And we need to have scalability across geographies and crisis types, academics, workforce upskilling. How do we interpret AI outputs, and how do we plan for it? It's not one pipeline, one streamline. We all need to work together, the academics, the tech world, the recruiters and HR functions, because the system must be able to be scalable, sustainable, people-centered. You can't take the human out of it, and be able to be scaled across crisis types. So the points of reflection, if I could just break it down to four basic prompts, I would say governance. What mechanisms can we put in place that creates a accountable ecosystem for AI-driven decisions, remembering that the human is the decision maker. So which decisions is allocated to the human, and what we can scale with an AI. What accountability structures are non-negotiable to us? What guardrails can we cannot do without? And those are the guard scales that keep the trust where it needs to be, and it makes sure that AI and technology can be the single source of truth, if you will. It can be um, um, agnostic and unbiased, but it's only as good as the human that writes the guidelines, only as good as the humans that build the ecosystem and the governance around it. And ultimately, how do we measure the success? And it's not just about speed, right? It's also about trust. So we keep on talking about the speed, the scalability, the consistency. But I would say that building those guardrails, that the trust is becomes almost inherent, and developing the guardrails that we continuously update, adjust, recalibrate, and be transparent about it. Um, it's it allows for this ecosystem. It allows for AI to do what it needs to do for the human ecosystem, so we can be better and at what we need to do to sustain ourselves. Now, there are many technologies and startup companies that identified um, different components of this need, right? One of which is communications. One of the major issues that anytime you're dealing with any type of crisis, we deal with is communications. A friend and a um, a startup CEO shared with me a very simple story of when we unfortunately in the United States we have a lot of school shootings. When events like that happen, the number of phone calls a central command receives, and each one of them is from a different perspective and different timing. And we may have 4 or 5 different groups, law enforcement officers, first responders, fire departments, hospitals, all responding with the best of intention all at one time. But if there is not synergy between and amongst all of the responders, all of the individuals who have a stake and accountability and responsibility for supporting and safeguarding, we are only as good as everybody sitting outside the door and waiting for someone to tell them what to do. In the California fires, one of the most interesting things, I'm standing there watching these planes fly into the ocean, pick up water one by one, and dropping again one by one water over these fires. Now imagine if we had one pilot that could operate multiple drones, and we could build an algorithm and have a built-in communication system that with the push of a button we could say who, what, when, where, and how. Now that is not a new concept. That's the first principle thinking. So what if we would do that? What if we would apply the first principle thinking to some of these self-made, human-made, natural-made disasters and conflicts that requires us to step up? So I would like to pause. I know I said a lot. I'd like to be able to pause at this moment and ask if there are any comments or questions or thoughts. Okay, so perhaps afterwards we can read some of the comments. What I would say is that our mission, should we accept it, it is to design the humanitarian mobility playbook. Think beyond theory, creating governance charters, workflows, diagrams, and how we can have quick wins. And what are the KPIs? What are we measuring? What do we need to measure? And then I encourage all of us to think about, if a wildfire happened near you tomorrow, what would our system look like? If there's a conflict near you tomorrow and it requires all of us to be all hands on deck, what do we do? And there is no one answer. And that's why I'm posing the question to all of us to be able to think about um, doing our part with it. And there is an interesting question: how do we um, how do you see balance between human intuition and AI driven insight evolving in the next 5 years? Very good question. It is all about how do we step in. AI is not stopping for us to tell it what. AI systems, the ecosystem is not stopping. Companies and all of us at one point or another are using a form of AI. ChatGPT is the most prevalent. But the balance between the human intuition and the AI driven insight is these areas of governance that I mentioned. Are we going to be able to describe and explain AI quickly so that we can get all of our networks in line? Can we develop a singular mission? How do we capture and talent mine? Many of organizations, whether you're in HR or talent management, um, we still are in old school of job fairs, posting jobs. And the consideration that most organizations give is 80-20. As long as our processes and policies and systems cover the 80%, we're good to go. I would venture to say it's the 20% that has that one brilliant unicorn obsession, that one thought that we need to capture. So we need to have better systems to be able to mine talent and be able to capture not just Ivy League schools, capture talent in that 20% that exists and we need to capture, we need to pick up. One of the areas of the governance, and I put security, Rob, as part of that. And you're absolutely right. Having security for our technologies and having security for the emergency response, these are all basically, if I would say, consider a Swiss Army knife and imagine one platform and multiple areas of solution that can come together, all together, and provide the support that that scenario needs, right? You cannot remove the human out of it. So AI is our co-pilot. And again, I would say that if you're a bad pilot, the co-pilot can only do certain things. And I hope Gabe is on the call. So at some point, I'm sure he will let me know if I'm right or wrong. But I would, again, say that the person who, us as human, if we forget about our empathy, if we forget about our that voice within that says stop, don't go past this line. If we forget about all of those things and we put everything in a basket and hand it to a system which doesn't capture all of those various points, we are giving up our ability to build a complete ecosystem, to give up our ability to have that Swiss Army knife that have all of those things, all of those components, all of those services that we need all in one. And it's the human that can also build in some of those components that captures impact of crisis and be able to have predictive models. What is the cost if this gets out of hand? How do you manage emergencies? How do you deal with some of the restrictions that in California, we have flights cannot be, this far apart. They have to be this close. You cannot use this product. You cannot. So all of that, those are all valid. Those are all part of the governance. But we can't deal with it unless we acknowledge it. We see whatever regulations we've had 10 years ago, 20 years ago, are they still valid? Do they need to be adjusted? So my apologies for going over time, but these are all really good points. And I think there is no one person, one discipline, one industry can answer all of these questions. It needs to be all hands on deck. It needs to be all of us thinking through this logically, pragmatically, and remembering as humans we do have biases. So let's not build that into a system that we want to be our co-pilot. Let's build a playbook that acknowledge our fallacies, our predictable weaknesses, and build a system that can help us be stronger. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me today. These are all thoughts that I'm certain all of you guys at some point or another have thought about. And I think it is really, really important that we make this our mission. Doesn't matter what role you have within an organization, what level, it is important to think about all of these things, all of these components, as we're designing the future of work, as we're designing the future of AI, the use of AI, and the governance surrounding it. So unless there are any other questions, I appreciate and I'm most grateful, and I wish all of you a great day. Thank you, and speak to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Daena. This was really great. Yeah, it's actually really funny because yesterday we were having a chat on pretty much the same topics. People are trying to make sense of how to interact with AI agents, and it's also funny because we're here in Spain and you guys had these wildfires in California, and for some reason we had them after that in Spain and Portugal, right? Yeah, and this is exactly the point. A lot of people aren't sure how to interact with AI agents because no one really tells them to. No one is really giving them a clear path on what to do, And we were watching also recent layoffs. I believe in the case of Intel, it was 25,000 employees. Microsoft 15,000, and recently Accenture with 11,000 people laid off, told specifically that they need to know about AI agents, but were never told where to learn about them and what to do with them exactly. So the way you presented this in a very thoughtful way of, we're using this as a tool. This is a collaboration, and it has to penetrate governmental structures. I think this is such a great point, and it's precisely the reason why we're all putting our time into the academy, because basically what this means is that we need to have people trained on certain things who are in multiple key positions across OEMs, across startups, across VC funds, and across government representatives. It is absolutely vital that both sides understand what we're talking about. So for example, as you said, with the wildfires in California, I imagine must have been horrible, watching planes go to the water and then carry one unit back in where the wildfires are. We should have had a digital twin of LA or of California, and we should have known exactly what to send where based on the speed of the wind and all that. So the technology is there. The issue is implementation. And implementation often falls not because of financial or logistical reasons, but simply because of a lack of understanding, or let's say a competence gap in between. So the purpose of all of this then, what you're doing now, is essentially filling in a competence gap. So kudos for doing that. Let's hope we're moving in the right direction. And I see answer to Sumik. This is very nice. It's nice to see that Rob, since he has 30 years experience in fire management, right? He does make this great point. So it's nice to see people like him that have been on the ground dealing with wildfires personally. The extent to which Rob also seems to want to implement AI agents. And I like his point about restricting the breach between emergency and crisis.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's exactly surprising that we haven't seen the implementation of AI at the same rate within the emergency sector as we have in other regions of industry, like security, for example.
Yeah.
And yeah, the human factor. So like, just curious on all of these points. What do you think about? Do you think it's also what I'm guessing it is, that it's some kind of, not a competence gap, which by the way is not to say that people are lacking a competence. It's systemic. It's just because people are being told, hey, you need to learn about AI agents, but are not told what to learn and who to speak with, right? Which is creating a lot of confusion, and people are reacting instead of being
Or
proactive
what
about
it
it.
is. What is an AI agent? There's many of the um, great talents, great minds of specific industries. They're so focused on their specific industry, right? So the next step is, how does what you do intersects with someone that's sitting next to you that is focused on security? How does someone that's sitting in HR and recruiting for tech engineering, software engineering, how does that role need to be to expand to what the software engineer of the future should look like? So, and I think that's what is so unique about Metapilot Academy. It's it's a total approach, right? You hear me talk about the Rubik's cube. It's aligning the colors, all of the colors, to make one ecosystem work, not just one side, right? As Rob mentioned, bridging the gap, the security, the governance, the people side of things. It's not just the human, right? It's also the wildlife. How do you evacuate wildlife? I mean, humanitarian is, we are the human in it, but it's covering the whole ecosystem. So you're absolutely right. This is it.
Yeah, and well, what else? I mean, I'm happy to take more questions, but I think one thought I've been having is about defining the problem space. Yesterday, someone made an analogy between an AI agent and an intern, and it's very true. Like sometimes we had interns coming, and there's this cliche about interns that they're going to be given a very simple problem and somehow find a way to mess it up. It's because to some extent, we need to define the problem space. So if we take, for example, let's just take LA and not the whole of California,
Yeah.
is we're thinking, okay, we have the speed of the wind, we have the size of the wildfire, and we probably have an idea of how many drones need to be sent with exactly how much water in order to contain it. And we heard from other people that the speed of the wind was just something they've never seen before. It's also an environmental issue. But I think that there are other elements at play. I think it's also the flammability of the materials there. It's a lot of other things that when you build a digital twin and you're trying to solve the problem need to be taken into account. That said, the twin would probably help reduce the problem, but you still need people like Rob, I think, to go and
Absolutely.
yeah, you still need like the human, right, in the loop. And at the end of the day, it's, well, I like to say that it's a bit like driving the carriage or flying the plane,
Yeah.
or navigating the ship, right? You're, in the end, is the human driving this entire thing, the ship.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, let's see. Sumit, love the perspective on how AI augments human capability rather than replacing it. Exactly. The real power lies in how we combine human intuition with AI precision. Would you agree, Dana?
Absolutely. No, it's absolutely. It's not us or them. It's not AR or human. Um, I the they You cannot remove the human out of AI and expect it to do what you want it to do. Period. And I think that what would be fantastic is if we would get people from all of these disciplines that we talked about, people like Rob and David Dundas and all of the peoples that have been really really engaged in dealing with crisis. And I mean, bringing them together with the HR functions, with the big tech companies that are really focused on some of this other stuff, just to capture the to-do list. I mean, let's take bite sizes, right? Let's create our checklist first. What are the things that we need to think about? Once we do the who, what, when, where, and how, the next step is, okay, now let's move forward to the next step. But right now, just avoiding it doesn't make it go away, right? 11,000 people laid off in just one company.
I was about to raise this question with you because you're the HR expert here. And at the end of the day, I feel that the issue is emotional, perhaps. Why doesn't it pervade every domain and subdomain? Why doesn't everyone, dealing with wildfires within governments, within insurance companies, within real estate, within every field that is affected, why don't they just immediately adopt AI and just, come up with a solution? Often it's financial, but I find that most times it's actually emotional. I'm really curious in our perspective here because I feel like people, their first reaction is, especially seeing the amount of layoffs, is thinking, well, they're going to lose their career, right? Something they've invested decades in. And this is a very real human fear. And I think for us, the challenge is also how you deal with that, how you deal with that sentiment of fear and of loss. And you have the decades of experience in dealing with humans that have that fear. So I'd love to know
and
how you
and
feel about
also firsthand experience of being a human also helps. So I would say that, in my experience, what I have seen, and I will summarize it to the FUD factor: fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right? So create the fear. So when you don't know what you don't know, you're afraid of it. When you're uncertain of what it is, the future holds, you're afraid of it. And if you doubt where you stand, if you're going to fit in, am I good enough? What is going to happen to all of that? So when you put those three together, and you don't have a source to clarify or adjust your thinking or show you a different side of this, right? What you have is a closed loop discussion with yourself. So the fear, uncertainty, and doubt keeps on growing. So now you have an enemy, and the enemy is AI, right? So again, us and them. So if you think about way back when they developed the first, um, I think it was Ford Motor Company who actually did that, lines where they automated parts of the car being put together through line. Initially, all of the workers were petrified. We're going to lose our jobs. Well, what did they have to do? They had to upskill. They had to learn how to operate those lines in order for the right parts to be on the right line for them to be collated and put together. When they developed different ways of doing surgery, laparoscopic surgery, right? Does that mean that we don't need surgeons anymore? Well, no. It only means that we are creating these tools to make us better at what we do. Because here's the thing: we have not been able to be better humans. So we also need to have better ways to support and be able to manage some of the things that we have to do to sustain ourselves. Evolution of all things, right? And um, and I think one of the first steps is doing better at explaining. So we need to be better at explaining what AI is. What can it do? How does it work with you? How do you um, partner with AI to scale? Instead of one task, you have the capability to manage multiple, right? It doesn't mean that you work harder. It means that you have to think more, you have to work smarter, right? And that sometimes gets scary. Thinking differently, adjusting your approach, it gets emotional. That's the emotional part of it. It's becoming obsolete. As I am becoming obsolete, versus imagine yourself differently. Imagine you yourself learning a new task, learning how to, um, you know, a lot of painters have one medium that they paint. And when you say, okay, why don't you try, instead of watercolor, acrylic? Oh no. But the first time they try it, they're like, well, this gives me a different texture, right? Because humans understand with all six senses, right? We smell, we hear, we have memory, we have archives that we pull information out of, right? So I think we need to acknowledge the fact that we have capability to be more than we are. We just are too lazy to use it. Sorry.
So true. No, it's so true. And so, Dana, as a talent lead expert, would you say that it's on the companies that is their job to, when they're deciding that they need to lay off people in the thousands range, that they should probably have thought about this 6 months before and then come up with a program of upskilling certain people and or helping other people transition so that their careers are somehow maintained, right? For a long time people thought that there will be universal income, and then when you see the patterns in large tech corporations, it does not look like it. So from that perspective, who holds responsibility for ensuring that this transition is done in a smarter way or in a more humane way, let's say humane?
I would say it's a collective. And the reason I say this is because um, when you're talking about corporations, companies, they are for business, they are for profit, right? Which means that um, the ones that are balanced, they have a balance between business and duty of care for their employees, right? It's that they can balance the two. Um, but here's the thing. Um, you know how we say, for the last half an hour, I've been saying that we can't take the human out of AI. Every human has a decision to make. You cannot hand over your decision making yourself to someone else so that they would do it for you, right? Um, the common saying that you with healthcare, you need to be your own biggest advocate. You know yourself better than anybody, right? You need to be your own advocate. This is the same thing with the job market. This is the same thing when you are um, thinking about what you will do in the future. What happens with us as humans is complacency. When we get comfortable, I'm just going to do this until I retire, right? How many times have you heard that? Versus, um, yeah, I'm going to do this now, but I need to learn about more about AI. Myself, I've been doing human resources in almost 30 years. I work for every industry, including defense. So I would say that as I've been involved with Metapilot and talking to various cohorts, one of the questions I had to ask myself is that what have you done? What have I done to upskill myself so that when I am engaging, I am not pontificating. I'm not just saying these things that sound good, but I'm also coming from a perspective that I need to upskill. I need to learn more because whatever we learned yesterday, it's already yesterday, right? So when we talk about this kind of a playbook, it should have already been in place. So do corporations have a role? Absolutely. Do HR functions, business partners have a function? Absolutely. Do government institutions have a role? Absolutely. Do startups, these companies did 20% uh, geniuses that will run around and start, startups five at a time? Do they have a role? Yes, they do. Are people who are actually doing the hard work, people like Rob, right? People that are actually in these type of scenarios. Do they have a role? Absolutely. None of these pieces can work with the other. That's why I talk about the Rubik's Cube. Each one of these pieces has a function. Building a playbook without having input from subject matter experts who have hands-on experience is literally like drawing something and putting it in a drawer and never looking at it again, right? Policies and processes and systems, human systems, are only as good as how they operate, how they're being utilized, and whether or not they serve the purpose they were meant to. So I've never known a policy that can be written and never ever recalibrated, ever. Life changes, people change, business changes, the goals and missions, objective of a business changes, which means that you will always have to have one eye on your infrastructure, the guardrails that you built for your company, for your business, and the other eye on what the future is holding. Will it stand? Not one solution, it's all of us.
Definitely. Well, this is a really great perspective, and I like how you responded to my question that it's no single person's responsibility to ensure one's own evolution. It ultimately falls on the individual, but also, I guess, I mean, it is recruiters who have to keep in mind that they are human beings and they might just, without instructions, a bit like the same with an AI agent that doesn't have the right instructions, people will
Exactly.
not go in the right direction, right? So if you just kind of move them in the correct direction, hopefully they also have some interest. And then there's yeah, that's why I say, I think to some extent it's emotional. There's empathy there, there's some
Yes.
compassion, there's some interest in being humane on one side, and there's some willingness to learn on the other, and then they kind of meet in the middle, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The duty
Mm.
of care is you can, as a company, as a company functioning in a community, if it's a global community or a small company, you have a duty of care. How you define that duty of care, it also suggests the fabric of the company you are, right? It talks about the DNA of the company you are. So if you don't care, that's your DNA, right? I'll just get more people because they're dispensable. Or I have invested a lot of money training them, right? They have the institutional knowledge of my company, which means that I am only as good as the people who know what works and what doesn't work in my company, right? So if you build that into the DNA of your human resource function, then whatever recommendations or processes and policies gets drafted, the DNA will always be based on very specific components. It's kind of like algebra. Once you establish the given, it's only the formula.
Sorry, just one last. Sorry to take your time, but I
No,
see
no
Rob.
worries.
We were talking about Rob, and I see he's trying to respond. So, looking several steps forward, I think organizations need to be looking at failure of AI as part of their business continuity plans,
Yes.
similar to how human failure can have a catastrophic impact. We are judged on our capabilities in recovery as much as we are during the implementation stage. Igniting these conversations early is imperative. Love the proactive approach of the academy. Biggest example of this in recent times is electric vehicles. All of a sudden, we have all these EVs on our roads. However, emergency services have limited knowledge of effective response and effective equipment. For the first time in the human race, AI and technology is developing faster than we can cope, and we need to catch up and fast. Yes,
Oh,
slow
spot
come.
on.
Yeah.
Rob, you need to teach a class. This is honestly, this is really, really good because we have so many anecdotes, right? Somebody was sitting in a one of the AI operated taxis. I'm not going to mention names, and for some reason, the update or upgrade of the system happened while they were in the road, and unfortunately, it was one of the days that it was 100 degrees, and everything was locked down, which means that the person that's in the car can't get out.
Oh my God.
Now, if you are a first responder, because now she's calling, the person is calling 911, I'm stuck 100 degrees, what do I do? Um, do they go and just break the window? How do you react to, is there a 911 for companies as such that says remotely open the doors and the windows, or do some, is there a release button that somebody can push and say, okay, interrupt the update or only update these times? So all of that stuff said, that Rob is spot on. It only is as good as the guardrails we built for, we the humans built for it. So yes.
Yep. Well, I mean, I really hope that you get to interact with more and more HR leads because we're meeting, quite a few these days. And I must say, like, I've been reading Sapiens again these days, and it's crazy that we're the result of millions of years of evolution, right? We exist because our ancestors and some of the previous generations managed to survive impossible conditions and
Yeah.
still managed to reproduce, and like we survive, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that none of that stuff held us back, no natural disaster, no apocalyptic event. And now it looks like ChatGPT might. This is silly, right? So I think it's also a matter of taking some people out of their comfort zone, especially people leading talent, and just being like,
Yes.
wake up. You are a human being, you're dealing with other human beings, and this is
Snap
not
out
hard.
of
Like,
it.
snap out of it.
Snap out of it. And yeah, snap out of it. And I think we. So one thing that I would say, I think as humans, we also need to acknowledge um, that we have become intellectually lazy, right? We have become so good at creating convenience, so good at accepting speed over quality, right?
Yeah.
Just give me quantity of garbage, right? So when all of that happens, it's not like our ancestors that they had to make sure that the wheel was round or else they would fall off and die, right? It's like, okay, well, you know what is the term what is it, acceptable risk? What is how much casualty would be acceptable for us? That is not a concept we ever thought about before, right? But now it's like, 80/20, as long as it works for 80. So I think we need to make some adjustments in how we operate. We also need to accept that kind of the intellectual laziness that some of us are suffering from, and then just snap out of it. Okay, catastrophe of 100 years ago is going to be very different than it is today
Mhm.
because we have become very good at creating things that can make a big boom.
1000%. I'm so happy to hear this from you and not me saying this because usually I'd be the one saying that something like intellectual laziness. So true. And again, I hope that people like you get to interact more with other HR leads and that people snap out of it because
Yes.
definitely the responsibility is shared. And it
Yes.
can it can go to very nice places. People could have amazing careers. We could go to space. We could mine asteroids. But we need to have some willpower and some grit in order to do that. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you
Thank you
very much,
so much.
Dana.
Thank you, Dana. Have a fantastic day and thank you
You
for
too.
this
Take care of
awesome
you.
presentation. Bye. Bye.